She said it loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Some people don't have the vision to invest in a decent lunch. Her assistant smiled behind her. The man at the corner table said nothing. He folded his receipt, slid it into his pocket, and looked up with eyes that held something she couldn't name. 2 weeks later, his signature on a single document would collapse her $90 million merger, and nobody, least of all her, would see it coming. David Cole had been awake since 5:30. That was the rhythm of his life now. Alarm, coffee, the quiet work of being both parents at once. He moved through the kitchen without turning on the overhead light, muscle memory guiding him to the cabinet for his son's cereal, to the drawer for the good spoons. Ethan came downstairs in his socks, hair pressed flat on one side. "You made eggs," the boy said, more statement than question. "Mom used to put hot sauce on them," Ethan added, and David found the bottle without being asked. They ate without the television on. Mornings were theirs. Nobody else got to touch them. At 7:40, David walked his son to the bus stop, watched the doors close, then drove downtown to the Richmond clerk's office, where he spent his days logging deeds and cross-referencing property transfers, quiet work that nobody thanked him for and everybody depended on. His supervisor called him the one who never makes a mistake and never talks about it. What she didn't know was that David had once been someone else entirely, a compliance attorney at a respected firm, before grief rearranged his whole life. That morning he'd read about a coming acquisition. Whitfield Financial Group, led by CEO Elena Whitfield, was pursuing a $90 million deal to absorb Cornerstone Community Bank. The article called it a landmark consolidation. David read it twice, felt something stir at the edges of memory, and told himself it was nothing. He folded the paper and went to work. At noon, he walked to the diner he'd been visiting since his first week at the clerk's office. He ordered what he always ordered, ate slowly, and didn't see her come in. He heard the door. He heard the room's atmosphere shift the way you feel weather changing. Then came the voice, practiced, aimed just a degree too wide to be accidental. She was looking at his worn shoes, his flannel, the $12 receipt on his table. Some people don't have the vision to invest in a decent lunch. He folded the receipt. He put it in his pocket. He looked up, already looking somewhere else. He sat in his car in the parking structure for 11 minutes afterward, hands loose in his lap, saying nothing to anyone. Can you imagine carrying an insult like that in silence, knowing exactly who had delivered it, and exactly what power you held over her future? That night, after Ethan was asleep, David went into the small study off the hallway. 2 shelves of law journals, a locked bottom drawer, a photograph of his late wife Sarah and her father on his retirement day. Robert Henley had spent 22 years in HR at Cornerstone Community Bank. David unlocked the drawer with the same key that sat between his car key and his house key, hidden, as he liked to say, in plain sight. Inside was a trust agreement naming him independent trustee of Cornerstone's employee pension fund, a role Robert had given him personally before he died the same year as Sarah, the worst year of David's life, running parallel to itself. Dramatic pause. Under federal fiduciary law, any merger affecting that pension fund required his written approval, not a formality, but a binding legal determination. 312 current and former employees depended on that fund for their retirement. And the woman who had mocked his lunch had no idea that the man she dismissed held the one signature standing between her and $90 million. He told himself he was only watching. He didn't yet know how little time was left to decide. Elena Whitfield walked into the clerk's office on a Thursday, requesting property records for the merger's due diligence. It fell, by chance, into David's section of the archive. He stepped in before his supervisor could. Elena's face flickered with recognition, then calculation. "The records you need are in Section 12, he said evenly, guiding her back through the shelves. "The boundaries on the older survey don't match the newer revision. The discrepancy needs to be noted." She studied him for a long moment. "I owe you an apology," she said. "What I said at the diner, that was unprofessional." He didn't answer that. He told her where the magnifier was and returned to his desk. 20 minutes later, alone at the reading table, her phone lit up with a message from a name David recognized without meaning to. Tell her the timeline doesn't move. Close by Friday. Elena didn't tell him she was leaving. But at the door, she paused, just briefly, and David couldn't have said why she did, except that she did. Soft pause. 3 floors above the boardroom of Whitfield Financial Tower, Richard Voss stood at the head of a long table, insisting the deal closed by Friday, that the independent trustee was some clerk in the county office who would sign without question. Elena kept her hands flat on the table. "We move when the review is complete," she said. Voss smiled the way men do when they've decided to let something go, temporarily. What she didn't know was that 3 floors below, a junior analyst named Denise Ruiz had just found a spreadsheet formula that didn't match the printed summary beside it, a $22 million gap between what the number said and what the report claimed. She closed the file. She said nothing to anyone. Not yet. At his kitchen table that night, David spread Robert's old Cornerstone reports beside the public filings Whitfield had submitted. 3-line items refused to reconcile. The variance, added across 3 years, came to almost exactly $22 million. He circled the number and wrote nothing else. He was going to need more than a hunch before he acted, and he was beginning to understand there wasn't much time left to find it. The diner was quieter that evening when Elena came in again, telling herself it was on the way home, that she owed him a real apology. David was at the window table with Ethan, who was drawing a submarine in a battered notebook. "Do you work with my dad?" the boy asked her directly. "Not exactly," she said, and something in her shoulders loosened for the first time all week. They talked about nothing: the weather, the road work on Broad Street. "I'm told closings like the one I'm working on are straightforward," she said at one point. Not quite a question. David looked at his coffee. "Most of them are," he said. "Not all." She watched him for a long moment, the pause before his words, the total absence of performance she wasn't used to from anyone in her professional life. She didn't push further. But she went home that night and read the merger's liability section again from the beginning, for the first time actually questioning the shape Voss had always handed her. The envelope that changed everything arrived addressed to Marcus Webb, David's former colleague, now outside counsel for Cornerstone. Marcus called him that afternoon. "I need you to look at something." "Not officially. Just look." What he sent, once decrypted, was 41 pages, internal emails between Richard Voss and a third party, spanning 8 months, discussing the deliberate suppression of a $22 million bad loan portfolio to preserve favorable valuation optics through closing. Favorable, the emails made clear, for the board. Not for the beneficiaries. Not for Elena. David sat with the file open for a long time. If the merger closed on manipulated numbers, 312 people, many of whom Robert had known by name, would inherit a pension fund weaker than anyone had told them. He thought of Elena turning her coffee cup at the diner. He was almost certain she hadn't known. He thought about what it would mean to act, what would come out, who would understand, and who wouldn't. He stood for a while in front of Sarah's photograph in the hallway, then went back to the study, unlocked the drawer, and took out the pen he hadn't used in almost 2 years. He began to write. The press conference was set for 10 o'clock. Cameras adjusted. Voss arrived early, unusually early, talking low to 2 board members near the coffee service. Elena sat down at 9:45 with her portfolio, feeling nothing about the cameras at all. At 9:57, Voss's phone buzzed. Something in his expression contracted, then smoothed over. 2 minutes later, a legal aide brought Elena a printed page. An emergency filing had landed with the State Fiduciary Office at 9:45 that morning, a formal objection to the merger, citing material misrepresentation of pension liabilities, specifically a $22 million omission. The transaction, it stated, could not be finalized without independent trustee concurrence, which was being withheld pending investigation. The signature at the bottom read, David A. Cole, independent trustee. Nobody in that room could have predicted what came next. Elena read it twice. She thought of the corner table, the folded receipt, the way he told her quietly, "The originals will have the surveyor stamps you'll need." She set the page down flat. "We are postponing," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Voss came off his phone call. Their eyes met across the room. Elena stood up. She came to the clerk's office alone the next morning. No aide, no publicist. "You could have told me," she said. "You had 3 opportunities." "No," David answered simply. "I didn't. You needed to decide about the merger based on what you actually knew, not because a county archivist pointed you somewhere." She absorbed that in silence. "I said something terrible to you," she finally said. "And you never used it. You could have gone straight to the press." "It wasn't personal," David said. "It was humiliating." He didn't soften it. "Yes. And then I had a job to do." That afternoon, Elena called an emergency board session. She stood before 11 directors and asked for an immediate suspension of Richard Voss pending investigation, laying out the emails, the spreadsheet, a recorded statement from Denise Ruiz, and the trustee filing itself. Voss spoke once, "This is a mischaracterization," and stopped when she looked at him. By 5:30, the board voted 9-2 to suspend him and refer the matter to state and federal regulators. That evening at dinner, Ethan asked his father if he'd seen the news. "There's a CEO lady who said something bad about you and then said sorry on TV," the boy said. Was she actually sorry, or just saying it? David considered his son with the same seriousness he gave everything. "I think she meant it." Ethan nodded, satisfied, and went back to his plate. The merger closed 61 days later, its terms rewritten in 12 material ways, the hidden losses disclosed, the price corrected, the pension fund protected under independent oversight for 5 years. David signed the final documents on a Tuesday afternoon. When it was done, Elena said only, "Thank you." He said, "Robert would have wanted this done right." Neither of them said anything more. But she didn't look away first. By April, the diner had become a habit that nobody planned. Ethan had decided Elena's opinion of his drawings mattered. He'd shown her the submarine, the aircraft carrier, and a small horse standing improbably on its deck, which he named Perry and refused to explain. "I think he adds something," Elena said, studying it seriously. Ethan agreed completely. One quiet afternoon, with the lunch rush cleared and a song playing low from the kitchen, Ethan ran off to greet a friend in the parking lot. Elena picked up the bread basket and offered it across the table. David reached for it at the same moment. Their hands met over the basket, just the edge of her fingers against his, and neither of them pulled away. Through the window, Ethan pointed at something across the street, entirely unaware. The song from the kitchen played on, and for the first time in a very long while, neither of them was thinking about anything they'd lost.